Hi, my name's Michael and I'm back for another reading type video, and I'll just quickly go over the books that I've read since the last reading video I did 2 weeks ago, and just talk about the books I'm currently reading and planning to read. As you might know, I was reading The Godfather by Mariam Puzo, and I really enjoyed this book. I feel like it went into more depth into the minor characters, which made the book really interesting. I love the movie, and I'm really glad to have read this book because I was able to learn more about the characters. The movie is definitely better than the book, but I think it was well worth reading the book, and I would love to read more of the series because I am really interested in the Italian mafia and books about it. Even though it's fiction, I think it's an interesting topic to explore. I mentioned I was going to read The Enigma of the Return by Daný Laferrière, and this is translated from the French by David Homel, and I really enjoyed this. This is more a novel in verse, and I think that's really fascinating, the way he was able to tell his story through poetry, and poetry was able to express so many different emotions really well. And there are scenes that aren't in verse, but for the majority of it, it is in verse, and it is a very autobiographical novel about escaping Haiti during a time that was turbulent and having to return when his father died, and it was a touching story, and I'm really glad to have read this one. Another book I read on my e-reader was The Story of O by Pauline, and this was translated by Sabine, and this is a pretty famous erotic novel, and while I didn't really enjoy the story as a whole, I think it was a really interesting read, and I'm glad I read it. And what interested me most was the backstory and the reason why she wrote this book. Her lover is a huge fan of the Machkasov, and he once said that a woman couldn't write a book like this, so she sat down to prove him wrong and wrote The Story of O, and it's been a pretty prolific erotic story as a result of that, and I think that was fascinating. I'd love to know more about that backstory and find out a little bit more history of these two people, because I love that she's sat down to prove him wrong and was able to deliver, and I think that was enough to make me read the book. And while I don't want to talk too much about it, and while I wasn't a real fan of any of the book, I'm a fan of sitting down and proving someone wrong. I also read Browsings by Dirda, and this is a collection of his essays he wrote in a journal throughout the year, and they're just short little essays about 1,000 words each, and just talking about books in general and his life. And I read this because I wanted to read some more essays on books, and most of you know that I'm trying to write an essay a month, and most of them are probably going to be about books, and I just wanted to get some ideas. I don't love this book as much as I love some of the other books I've read on books, and it's definitely not rated high, but I really enjoyed just a short, quick, personal essay about books. And hopefully it gives me some ideas for essays in the future. Now moving on to what I'm currently reading. I'm currently reading A Romance with Cocaine by Ageyev, and this is translated by Hugh Aplin, and it is a very interesting book. So far it's just a story of a man growing up in the Russian Empire just before the revolution, and not much has happened yet, so it started off slow, but I know it's going to kick off into his relationship with cocaine and the Russian Revolution. While I want that to happen now, I'm still trying to get through the backstory, and hopefully the backstory isn't too much more of the book, because I feel like it's more filler rather than the actual content of what he's trying to say with the book. I'm also reading The 12 Chairs on my e-reader, and while I hate my e-reader, it's great to be able to access books like this, and this is a old Soviet novel which is very funny, which is something I don't often see in Soviet novels, and it's telling the story about this man trying to hunt down these jewels. His mother-in-law died and said she hid some jewels in a chair, and because of the Soviet era, the chairs are no longer theirs, it's somewhere else. So he's trying to find the chairs, and he's going through Russia trying to search for these chairs. But the problem is the priest also knows the secret about these jewels, and he's trying to find it. So this is kind of a race to get there first, and it's also exploring the landscape of Russia, which is really interesting. And audiobook, I'm also reading another Russian book, and that is The Grey House by Mariam Petrosyan. And I'm only a little bit through it. It's a story of a boarding house full of disabled children and just exploring their lives. I'm assuming it's going to be a little better. It's going to be simplistic, but I haven't worked out what it's trying to say, and I'm hoping it's going to be that. Otherwise, it's just going to be this character-driven story of kids in a boarding house, but we'll see how it goes. And I've been wanting to read this book for ages, and it's finally been translated into English, so I'm happy to be able to get a chance to do that. And I just noticed that all my currently reading are Russian literature, and the next book I'm planning to read is on Russia. It is called The Patriots by Sana Kresnikov, and this is actually the book club book for me this month, and I'm really interested to see how I go with this. I know she was born in the Ukraine, so that's a good start, and I know Olive from the book Olive really enjoyed this book, so I'm hoping to enjoy this one too. It is a multi-generational story about the Soviet era and escaping the Soviet era, I believe, but I don't know too much about it. So they're the books I'm reading and planning to read. If you want to find me elsewhere, all my links to social media are in the description below, and as always, thank you for watching.